As the months went by after that speech Gretel made, everything was going well. Augsburg no longer had to fear Muriel, as she has shown the town that she has changed. At first, to the townspeople, it wasn't easy to accept Muriel, but as time went on, they soon realized that Muriel's ice-cold heart had been melted by Gretel's kindness. Mina was due any time now, and spring was on its way to Augsburg. The snow was almost gone. Muriel and Gretel still had been seeing each other, and it didn't take long for Augsburg to see that Gretel and Muriel were dating. Of course, Brooklyn had turned 8 years old in November, and Diablo hadn't been worried about her sister being so much anymore. Now he mainly was happy that Muriel was doing a lot better, and that had changed for the better. Muriel wanted to ask Gretel something one night, but she wasn't sure how to say it, so she and Gretel were having a dinner night at Muriel's hideout, as they always did. But sometimes they have dinners at Augsburg in Gretel's house, and sometimes they would have supper with Diablo in Brooklyn in Gretel's old cabin, and sometimes they would go out to eat every once in a while. Gretel, can I ask you something? Muriel asked. Sure, Muriel, what is it? Gretel asked. When is Mina due? Muriel replied with a question. Because if she's due any time soon, we will need to stay at your house so as if she could go into labor any time. She's due next week. That's what she and Hansel told me, Gretel said, continuing to eat her dinner. Why do you ask? Well, it's just because we've been dating for about a couple of months now, and I feel a little bit closer to you than anyone else, Muriel explained. Would you want to stay over with me sometime? Like in your hideout? Gretel asked. Yeah, very well, and well, we haven't had a sleepover yet, and I might as well try it out and see if you like it. If you're up for it, Muriel replied. I think that's a great idea, but we'll have to do that after Mina has the baby, Gretel suggested. I want to be there for the birth of my niece or nephew. Just as Gretel said that, Ben showed up in a horse in a panic mode. Muriel, Gretel, Hansel and Mina both need you back at home. Mina's gone into labor, Ben said. We better get there quickly. Gretel answered as Muriel tossed Gretel a broomstick while she got on her own. We're flying there, Gretel. We want to be there for Mina and Hansel, Muriel said, as Gretel got on her broomstick. I'm not that great with broomsticks, Gretel warned Muriel. Throughout the months of dating, Muriel had taught Gretel how to ride a broomstick, and so far Gretel seemed to get the hang of it, but they do need to work on the landing, as Gretel's difficulty with landing was one of her weaknesses. But as the first time she landed with Diablo before seeing Muriel again, it didn't go so well, so as Gretel crashed. But as Gretel and Muriel fly through the forest, following Ben on a horse, they headed towards Augsburg and saw Hansel outside of his house. He led the girls inside to see Mina lying down on the couch. Is a doctor on their way? Gretel asked her brother. Yes, so we gotta make sure Mina is calm. I'm worried about her and the baby, Hansel replied. As Gretel and Hansel, Muriel, and Ben walked up to the sitting room, they comforted Mina and reassured her by telling her that she'll be okay, and Hansel was the one comforting her the most. Gretel felt bad for Mina for being in a lot of pain, and Muriel felt that way too. Mina had been practicing her breathing, like the way Gretel showed her from when Adriana was having her and Hansel. It'll be okay, Mina. Our mother's been through this once, Gretel reassured Mina. It really hurts, Mina replied, tears streaming down her face. Gretel couldn't even imagine if she and Muriel were to go through what Mina's gone through. Maybe it might be 10 times worse for Muriel, despite her being an evil witch. The doctor will be here soon, Muriel reassured to Mina. Then she learned how to comfort someone by Gretel. Even though whenever Muriel was in pain or sad, Gretel was always there to comfort her and vice versa. When the doctor arrived, Muriel along with Gretel stayed with Mina as Hansel and Ben waited outside the sitting room. Hansel and Ben were worried for Mina being in labor, but the doctor said that everything would be fine, and Gretel with Muriel did their best to comfort Mina throughout labor. It was a long time before Mina could start pushing. After what seemed to be 10 hours, Hansel was pacing around the room with Ben sitting on a chair. I hope the girls are okay. I haven't heard a single sound yet, besides them screaming. Mina mainly, Hansel said. He was worried that something was wrong. He didn't want to lose Mina again. The first time he lost Mina was when Muriel was evil. But now that Muriel's changed, Hansel was concerned about Mina and the baby. Was the baby stuck? Was Mina losing blood? Anything was possible, as each pregnancy and childbirth was different. Maybe Hansel was just paranoid a little, but ever since he was Mina's girlfriend, he hoped that something would go smoothly. I'm sure everything will be fine, Hansel. Just relax, dude, Ben reassured the witch hunter mayor. Just as Ben said that, cries of a baby can be heard throughout the house. Hansel wanted to go in and see Mina and the baby, but the doctor instructed him to wait until Muriel, Gretel, or the doctor came out. As the cry of a baby was heard, Hansel felt as if 100,000 pounds had been lifted off of him. Just as he said that, he heard a second baby crying, and Hansel was surprised and happy at the same time. Mina was pregnant with twins, and they were surprised about this, as twin pregnancy was very rare. Hansel was granted a gift from God, as he and Gretel were twins, but Hansel didn't expect Mina to have twins. After a few minutes, the doctor came out and said that Mina and the twins are doing fine. Hansel and Ben walked outside the sitting room. Muriel and Gretel were beside Mina on the bed. Hansel walked towards Mina's side and saw 2 bundles of joy in her arms. "Hansel, would you like to meet your son and daughter?" Mina asked, turning to see Hansel beside her. "Twins?" Hansel asked in surprise. "Mina was pregnant with twins the whole time, and this was a surprise," Gretel replied, smiling at her niece and nephew. Hansel took a look at the twins and got a good look at them. The daughter looked like her mother, with her ginger hair and Hansel's eyes, while the son looked like his father with brown hair and Mina's eyes. "They sure do take a lot from us," Mina said to her boyfriend. "They sure do," Hansel agreed. "You have any names for them?" Gretel asked. "My nephew and niece gotta have names. The boy's name will be Jack, and the girl's name will be May," Mina replied. Hansel liked those names, and Gretel and Muriel and Ben liked those names as well. Hansel took a hold of his daughter, while Mina held her son. Gretel and Ben eventually got turns holding the babies, and Muriel was nervous if she was offered to hold one of them. What if she scared them? That fear was disappearing, however, as long as she trusted Gretel and her friends. "Would you like to hold one of the babies, Muriel?" Gretel asked, but Muriel wasn't sure if it was a good idea. "I'm not sure. You see, ever since that happened before Muriel was cut off by Gretel, cradling her niece in her arms. "Muriel, that's in the past. You've done great with Brooklyn, and I think you should give this a chance," Gretel interrupted. "But Muriel paused for a moment. "Brooklyn was different since she was my niece, and she is your niece. Muriel, just give it a try. I have been taught how to cradle a baby, but with just a teddy bear before the twins were born," Gretel informed the witch. "Just cradle her like I show you, and be sure to hold her head and neck area." Gretel showed Muriel a proper way to cradle the baby, and even helped her adjust her where her hands should be. As soon as Gretel finished helping Muriel, the witch looked down at Gretel's niece. She was like an image of Mina, but only with Hansel's eyes. "She's beautiful," Muriel said, staring down at the baby which she was holding. She was getting used to this, as Gretel would be staying with Hansel and Mina for the first 2 weeks, as giving birth was exhausting, but the children as babies were a lot of work. "She is really cute. She looks like Mom," Muriel said. She was getting used to the idea of holding the baby in her arms. She must have held children when she was evil back then, but she never touched a child in a while, with the exception of Brooklyn, but that was because she was her niece. "Muriel was doing a great job, and she's holding the baby the way Gretel taught her," Hansel said to Mina. Muriel then looked down at the baby as she was still asleep. "She is really adorable," Gretel heard Muriel saying about her niece. "Of course," and Gretel looked down at her niece. "She sure is, Muriel," Gretel replied. As Muriel smiled at the baby, it squirmed and then started to cry. Muriel hated it when kids were whiny back when she was evil, but this time she didn't feel hate. She was confused as why was the baby crying. Did she do something wrong? Muriel was starting to feel paranoid within her, and she had no idea on what to do. "Oh, why is she crying?" Muriel asked quickly to Gretel. "Did I do something wrong?" "Relax, sweetheart. You did nothing wrong," Gretel reassured her girlfriend. "I think the baby's hungry." Gretel took her niece from Muriel and handed her to Mina, where she started to feed her babies. Muriel sighed in relief, as she was fearing that she did something wrong. Ever since she changed from evil to good, she was still paranoid about certain things, and Gretel, on the other hand, had a feeling that Muriel would be paranoid, but that she could help Muriel get over the things that she was paranoid about. Babies need to be fed by their mothers for the first while after birth, but they will start eating other foods as they grow and get older, Gretel said to Muriel. "So does that mean I have nothing to get paranoid about?" Muriel asked her girlfriend. "No, it's all good, Muriel," Gretel replied. Muriel smiled, knowing that she could trust Gretel and her friends along with her family now, and knowing that they have trusted her as well as Diablo and Brooklyn. That speech Gretel did was very powerful, and it was going to take a while for the townspeople to adjust that the sheriff and the mayor made. But eventually, the townspeople, they would get the idea of used to Muriel being a good person. Although it was very bizarre of an outcome of Muriel. If Gretel had not started visiting Muriel or convincing her to change, Muriel would still be evil, and Augsburg would have to fear Muriel until she's killed again. But so far, Muriel hasn't broken the trust with Gretel, and had no intention of doing so. Muriel had been doing good deeds for others, with Gretel's help of course. She was having a hard time doing certain deeds. As Muriel improved, she helped Gretel with her niece and nephew as well as her own niece. But of course, whenever Hansel and Mina needed help, Gretel was there along with Muriel to help as much as they can. For the first 2 weeks, it had been hard for the twins for Hansel and Mina, as Mina was resting from childbirth. After 3 weeks since Hansel and Mina had their children, they got some people to pitch in as well. Gretel, with Muriel's help, wasn't really needed when the twins were about 3 weeks old. The parents were getting used to their routine of being parents, so Gretel was now free to go with Muriel anytime she wanted, and she would occasionally have to babysit them when Hansel and Mina were both going out. But that was not a problem to Gretel. Gretel was riding her horse to Muriel's hideout, which was looking after Brooklyn while Diablo was out. As Gretel trotted up the mountains on her horse, she saw Brooklyn flying on her broomstick. As she turned around, she saw Gretel on her horse. "Hey there, Gretel," Brooklyn said, before she crash-landed on the ground with her broomstick. "You'll get better at landing, Brooke. With some practice, of course," Gretel chuckled as she hopped off her horse and walked towards Brooklyn. "Yeah, I gotta work on landing," Brooklyn said. As Gretel helped Brooklyn up, Muriel walked outside. "Hey there, girlfriend," Muriel said. She walked over towards Brooklyn and Gretel. She kissed Gretel's cheek and the sheriff smiled. Although Brooklyn liked to playfully get grossed out, she had seen them kiss before, and she did find it to be cringy, as Brooklyn was still a young kid, though. "Hey, sweetie, I hope you're doing okay," Gretel replied. "Of course I am. Why don't we fly on our broomsticks today?" Muriel suggested, grabbing herself a broomstick and tossed one for Gretel. Shortly after Hansel and Mina had their children, Gretel had been learning how to fly on her broomstick, even though she had landed perfectly too. "Sounds great. Let me just go tie up my horse and then we'll head out," Brooklyn said as she went to tie her horse up. As she was doing that, Brooklyn got back up and wanting to take off already. After Gretel was ready, the girls were soaring on the air on their broomsticks. Brooklyn was doing a few tricks and Muriel was showing Gretel a few tricks. It wasn't as hard, but as Gretel got used to it without any problems. As they were flying, however, a flock of seagulls were heading their way. "Duck!" Muriel shouted as she, Brooklyn, and Gretel ducked to get away from the seagulls. Luckily, no one got swarmed, and as they were unharmed, that was close. "Those shite-hawks really make me mad," Muriel growled. "No shit. My brother got crapped on by one as a kid, and man, that was stuck on his hair for a while, and my mom was combing it was a nightmare." Gretel chuckled as Muriel laughed. They knew it wasn't funny on the day it happened, but now to them it was funny. As the girls flew over the trees, they spotted a house by a lake, and they couldn't see anyone on the lake or on the land. So they landed on the broomsticks on the grassland, and they were by the house. Gretel looked around but couldn't see anyone in sight. Maybe the place was abandoned, or maybe someone owned the property. "I don't see anyone here, and there is the house," Gretel points out the house. She and Muriel started there to stare at the house for a while. They were unsure of who or what's inside, and Brooklyn was confused by this. So Gretel walked up towards the door and knocked, but there was no reply. Muriel then looked around her surroundings, and then the landscape and lake looked to her was all too familiar. "I think I remember this place," Muriel said to her girlfriend. "I believe this was the house I grew up in with Diablo." "You lived here?" Gretel asked, turning her attention to her girlfriend. "How?" Diablo and I lived here and grew up here a long time ago." "It's a very long story," Muriel replied. "We were living with my father and my mother, and that's when my father changed after my mother passed. Diablo was the only one I looked up to, and he was the best brother I've ever had." "Want to go inside his house?" Gretel asked her girlfriend. "There's no one home, and there's dust covering the furniture of it." Muriel nodded as she, Gretel, and Brooklyn pushed open the door. Luckily, it wasn't locked. The door was very old and rotted, and the place outside the house looked vacant. Gretel then had seen her dollhouse like this, and her old house like this, back when Muriel was evil a year ago. "Who owned this house?" Brooklyn asked her aunt. Muriel then looked down at her daughter, wondering on who owned the house. To Muriel, it was her and Diablo's house from years ago. Aunt Muriel and Daddy used to live here," Muriel explained to her niece. "It was a long time ago before you were born." "Really? What was it like living near by the lake?" Brooklyn asked. "Oh, it was peaceful and nice for the most part," Muriel replied, but stopped as she was having flashbacks of her past. As Muriel was in her trance, she stopped answering Brooklyn's questions, and her niece headed towards Gretel. "Gretel, Aunt Muriel won't answer my questions," Brooklyn said to the sheriff. I've got her to ask her about her life, and she just stood still. Gretel got up and walked in front of Muriel, and she did try to wave in front of her, but the witch was as still as a statue. So Gretel made a loud noise that snapped Muriel back into reality. What the? Gretel stammered as she looked back into reality. Then she was standing in front of Gretel. Oh, thank goodness you're okay, Muriel. Your niece was trying to ask you something, but she was worried about you as you just stood still frozen, Gretel replied. Are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. I just remembered how things were a long time ago since I moved away, Muriel replied. I wonder if some things of my father and mother remained here after all those years. Well, in that case, if they have treasures or something, we could take them back to Augsburg, Gretel suggested, and Muriel liked this idea. Gretel had, and of course, the clever chef, the sheriff, always had new ideas, and she had great plans for the treasure where they could find any. Gretel, along with Muriel and Brooklyn, headed upstairs to the bedroom, which belonged to the father of Diablo and Muriel. Whose bedroom did this belong to? Brooklyn asked. This belonged to your grandfather long before he passed, Muriel replied to her niece's question. Then Muriel found a chest in front of her in her father's bed. She and Gretel crouched down and examined it, and then Gretel took a bobby pin and picked at the lock on the chest. This surprised Muriel, as she, along with Gretel, never expected to find something in the chest. What is it? Gretel asked, seeing that Muriel was speechless. It's a chest. It's full of my jewelry and many other things, Muriel replied. She was taking the necklace and lockets inside. As Muriel opened up the locket inside, there was a picture of a woman. She looked like Muriel, but since the picture was black and white, it was hard to tell of the colors due to the hair and etc. Who is that in the locket? Gretel asked, seeing the picture inside the locket. It's my mother's. It was given to my father before me and Diablo were born. This was where our father kept my mother's things. He did put them all in there in this chest when my mother passed, Muriel answered, feeling saddened by her mother's things. It's sad that her mother had passed away on leaving Muriel to have her relationship issues with her father. Well, Gretel knew that Muriel didn't get along with her father, and Brooklyn seemed to get the idea. She was going to ask her aunt, but after hearing and sensing what was going on, Brooklyn felt so sorry and sad for her aunt. Muriel began to cry quietly as Gretel pulled her into a hug, remembering someone who had died in the past that can hurt you a lot. It was worse than a bullet. It was worse than breaking a bone. Heartbreaking moments were emotional, and that was what Muriel was feeling when someone mentioned her mother. We can leave if you want, Muriel. We don't have to stay, Gretel assured her girlfriend. The evil witch looked at Gretel and then at her mother's things. We'll take my mother's things. I need to keep some stuff that belongs to my mother, Muriel said to the sheriff. After a while of tears from the heartbreaking moment, the girls left the house and walked towards the lake. The sun was coming out of the clouds as it had been a bit cloudy that day. Want to go swimming? Brooklyn asked her aunt and the sheriff. Sure, what do you think, Muriel? Gretel asked. I guess so. I may want to sit out for a bit before heading in the water, Muriel replied. Gretel took her girlfriend's side, telling Brooklyn that they'll be a minute. You don't have to swim if you don't want to. I can go with Brooklyn if you want, Gretel said to her girlfriend. It's not that, Gretel, it's just... Muriel began between two sobs. Of all the treasures that my mom kept, they reminded me of her. It hurts me whenever I look at it. Well, we could sell it if you want, Gretel suggested, but you may want to hold on to some of her things. Like the locket we found and maybe the picture of you, Diablo, and your parents. Gretel pulled out the locket and the portrait of Muriel and her family. And even though Muriel was doing her best not to cry so much. Okay, I'll keep those, but please just sell the rest. Thinking about my mother sometimes makes me emotional, Muriel pleaded as Gretel nodded. I understand how you feel, Muriel. I lost my mother too, which I know you already know, Gretel assured Muriel, and Brooklyn was standing by the lake. She was impatient. Hey, are you girls coming or what? Brooklyn asked. Then Gretel and Muriel ran to the lake with Brooklyn. The water was a bit cold at first, but it was a nice day as it was hot enough to go swimming in it.